All right, this is for the HVR155 week 4 lesson 2 meeting for our evening class. We are going to be starting, so we are going to be getting into unit 20, or sorry, unit 31 still. We're going to continue working with gas furnaces. Hold on. Close my door. So, we're going to talk about gas furnaces. The main thing we're covering tonight is going to be ventilation. So how it's going to go for tonight will be, it will start with, I'll go over slides and information on ventilation, and then we will, we're going to go over those questions that you guys sent me from last meeting from Tuesday. And then after that, I'm going to send out some videos, and I just want you guys to watch those and answer some questions. And that's all it's going to be. So I'll probably be repeating that again in a little while. What's going on? How you doing, man? Oh,
Good afternoon. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing all right. Hanging in there. Yourself?
Yeah, same. Lots of home time.
Yeah, yeah. It's weird being at home this much. I'm going a little crazy. My dog's going crazy too. So we'll see how this goes.
I know. My dog appreciated it for the first couple of days. Now,
Yeah.
I think she wants me to go away for a little bit herself.
Yeah, she's like, oh, I want my own space. Like, what are you doing in my house? Like, you're usually gone some of the time, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what mine's doing too. So for tonight, what we're going to be going over is we're going to just discuss here at this first meeting. We're just going to go over the main lesson for tonight, which is really just talking about furnace ventilation. So we're going to go pretty deep onto it. Your book's got a whole section starting in, let's see, I think it's page 881. It continues to page 884. It talks about all the different things as far as connections and codes and what we're basically going to go over tonight. So that's a good area to follow along. After that, at 8, I'll have it where I'm basically going to be going over most of the questions or some of the ones that I thought were really good that were sent in from the other night, and basically have a discussion about them or talk about, or try to get clarification for some of them because they were worded a little strange. I'm trying to make sure I answer them right. And then instead of a 9 o'clock meeting, I've just got some videos that go over venting installation, venting application, and vent testing and all this kind of stuff. So what we go over here this first hour, I'm just going to give you extra videos and a couple of questions to answer to go along with those. I'll probably send those out, honestly, after this meeting. I'll probably send them out. Yeah, so that's all we're doing for tonight. I'll go ahead and get started on our slides. Okay, there we go. All right, so, all right. Talking about a lot of different things with this. Main thing we're talking about with it, again, like I said, venting types and styles, as well as piping. Those are the two things we're really going to be looking at, is ventilation and piping. This is what's key for a gas furnace to operate safely. You must have, proper piping for your gas lines to make sure that they feed the gas in at a steady rate, that they don't get clogged, they don't get damaged or corroded. Make sure they're the right size and everything like that. These are things that play a big factor. Ventilation is a major factor for energy efficiency as well as safety in the home. The ventilation is what allows for that furnace to burn safely. Back in the day, you had a fireplace going and it ventilated up the chimney. That was the old school way to do things. But nowadays, it's we have, metal flue stacks, and we have plastic PVC piping, and there's different reasons for different types of any venting materials, and different ways we're going to do this. So for the basic style gas furnaces, I think I sent you guys already a video out. I'll double check and make sure I'll probably send it again. But it goes over the different types of venting materials. Old school back in the day was a stuff called C-vent, and it was thin. It was one wall of basically metal, and it was pretty flimsy. Wasn't too great, but it could hold up to the heat, and it allowed for flue gases to travel a short path and then out the building. For a long time, this was pretty much the only thing you would see in systems was C-venting. The thing it upgraded to is B-venting, which your book actually has a diagram of a piece of B-venting on page 882, figure 31.90. Shows what B-venting looks like. But basically, B-venting, it comes with this nice cylindrical, piece of venting, and it's got inside of it, there's a second pipe, a second set of venting, basically. So it's double lined. It's got an interior actual piece of vent, and then it's got that exterior shell to go around it. This protects the gases from escaping and makes it so it's less likely to do so. One of the big problems with flue gases escaping is not just that flue gases are going to be in the living quarters, because they might not be. They might escape into a crawl space or an attic or some place that nobody goes to. So why do I care if they're escaping up there? If they're collecting, even if it's just small trace amounts, it shouldn't matter too much. But when it matters, the reason why is because as flue gases escape, there's something else that's escaping with it, which is heat, right? So we want to have it where for, depending on the system we've got as far as the ventilation for it, you have it where you have to keep the flue gases at a certain temperature, all right? And that temperature will make sure that the water vapor in the flue gases, the nasty acids and all sorts of stuff like that will stay as part of the flue gas. They'll stay in a gaseous state. They won't condense into water and then corrode and rust out different components. The flue gases need to make sure that they keep that temperature. But if the flue piping, the flue ventilation is really leaky, or is starting to have some leaks, or right from the get-go when it's first installed, it's not sealed up very well, you can have it where each time that gas passes through, right, all those little holes and leaks are little spots that the gas leaks out and heat leaks out, and then from that point moving forward, the gas is going to be cooler and cooler and cooler until it gets to the point where it starts to condense. Now, it might not be a huge amount to start with, but if it starts condensing, then it'll start to find a spot, usually on metal, that it can sit, and then it'll eat through that metal, and then you've got it where it's going to vent more. Now it's going to leak more. So now that it leaks more, it's going to cool off faster. And there's going to be more condensate gathering in that location, and the hole becomes bigger and bigger and bigger until the point where you go down there and it's the first time someone's ever seen this furnace because they haven't had someone out in 15 years, and the entire flue piping is not there. It's just gone, and the flue gases are just dumping into the crawl space. I've seen that. It's not a pretty sight. I was like, oh, this is terrifying. You guys are basically just having flue gases dump into your basement or into your crawl space, and you have no idea. Like, yeah, we didn't know. No one got lightheaded on this side of the house or anything like that. Nope. Okay. So the funny thing was they had a carbon monoxide detector on the opposite side of their house. So they had one, but it was in the wrong spot. So I told them, where to put their monoxide detector, and then you replace all their flue piping. One of the things I made sure was, that it was sealed up tight. I taped every single joint in connection. I made sure that it was pitched properly. Your book has a diagram on 883 talking about basically for every foot that you run, you should go up a quarter of an inch as far as the piping. That's a pretty good rule of thumb for metal flue piping, especially to make sure that basically when you're making it move up that way, anything, the condensate will roll back down towards the furnace, if anything. So it's just a little bit of a safer method for that to operate. And plus code usually is going to determine a lot of that stuff for different areas and everything. But typically quarter of an inch for every foot running, you're going to be safe doing that. So deventing though, it had where you had that those two walls of metal, which worked really, really well. And then the newer stuff is all switched to PVC. That's pretty much everything now. But the reason why we had to have metal is because the flue gas is coming out for so long when we were having 75, 85% furnaces as far as the AFU rating. 15% of the heat of combustion or 25% of the heat produced from combustion would be going out of that flue stack. I mean, those flue temperatures would be 600 degrees, 400 degrees. As they got more and more efficient, flue stack temperatures would lower. And you'll see that as a common thread when you look at energy efficiency levels and flue stack temperatures. It's always that as a furnace becomes more and more efficient, the flue stack temperature becomes less and less and less. And the problem with that temperature going down, though, is that the thing we're trying to prevent the whole time, condensation. We're trying to prevent that those flue gases from condensing into that really nasty water with carbolic and sulfuric acid in it, and that's what eats away at our flue piping. That's what eats away at that metal. Well, this is why for the modern furnaces we have it where they're designed to handle those kinds of acids, because they make the venting, they make the fan blades, they make the motor wheel and everything connected to it all out of plastic. And plastic is really resilient to carbolic and sulfuric acid and condensed flue gases and all that water that's really, really nasty stuff. It can take care of it, no problem, which is one of the cool things about it. It's that's the nice thing with this new systems, and so that's why it continues. The ventilation is completely made out of plastic. So, is it a perfect solution? No, but is it a really easy way to have higher efficient fuel burning? Yes, because I mean that's the whole thing. Like people talk about what's better for the environment and what's good for it and things like that. Yes, plastic PVC piping is not the best thing ever because it's still made from fossil fuel, but by using that fossil fuel piping, we're actually making it so that the furnace, which uses a fossil fuel to heat, will use less of that fuel for heating. So over its lifetime, it always balances out as far as carbon footprint goes. The PVC piping over that furnace's lifetime of operating at a high efficiency. The problem is just making sure that it maintains that efficiency. Yeah.
So, is there a way that the condensation is mostly occurring when the system is no longer running? So, like when the vents and the flue itself is cooling down, you have that heat that's in there. So, okay, so the system itself is no longer running. So that's when you get the condensate run back down, or
no, you'll have the for a conventional gas furnace where it's going to be that really high temperature with the metal flue piping, they'll have it where that condensate can get trapped in there, and that flue gas can. Once a furnace is finished burning, the fan motor for the flue gases stays on and does what's called a post-purge. So after it fires off, it purges the system and makes sure that it can push it all the way out of the house and doesn't let it collect anywhere in there, so it doesn't have to worry about oh, it's cooled off now, and it's going to start condensing. But the you can have it happen if you have a leaky spot, or you have it where there's basically a dip in your flue gas, because that heat can move by, but it'll eventually cool off enough where something will collect down there.
Right.
And so that's why general rule of thumb for ventilation is always, if you can go straight up through the roof, go straight up through the roof, as close to that as possible. But it's not always, because there's beams and floors and bedrooms, and some kid doesn't want a flue gas vent going through bed or something like that. I don't know why. It's a really good way to heat your bed. But the plastic ones, they have it where because that secondary heat exchanger, that one with all those fins and everything like that, it cools it off so much. Right there at that secondary heat exchanger is where you're going to see your condensate actually collect. And it's just basically moving out very toxic, low temperature flue gases by the time it gets to the end. And those condensate, that'll be right there next to the unit. It'll drain out and go right down the drain, with the same line that's used for the condensate for the air conditioner in the summertime. So we got it's a lot of crazy stuff, but it's pretty cool. Like I said, conventional, you're going to see your metal is what you're going to be using C or B venting, but for high efficiency, we're talking about plastic, as far as the fans, the piping, everything like that. Yeah, it's either going to be, it's technically called HPVC, is what most people will call it, because it's designed for heating. That's the specific one. So don't use just basic regular PVC. It's got to be that special kind. But as far as sealing it up and gluing it together, it works the same exact way. You have it where you put on, a primer with a little wand, and you brush it on, and then you put on your glue, and then you just stick them together. And a lot of the new ones, especially for the stuff made for joining HPVC for ventilation, it's really high quality. Like the connections don't just glue together; they basically melt the plastics together with the chemical reaction of the primer and the glue. I guess it's weird stuff, but you can't get them apart. It's the toughest thing in the world. But it's good because for metal flue gas, it was easy enough. If you wanted to seal it up, it was metal. It was solid. It's not going to leak. If anything, it's got a couple of seams that you can tape over. You would bead, some HVAC silicone that's meant for, basically out of a caulk gun and everything, just like anything else. But it's that's what it used to be, and that's sealed up really, really well. But the plastic, it's weird because it's not as easy to inspect. Like the metal, you can tell if there's a puncture or a hole or a crack. But the plastic, it's tough because it's this, cross section, thin little fibers all together in one little thing to make the wall for it. Where you might not know you've got a weak spot until the system's been installed for a month or so or something like that. I had that happen to a guy. Yeah, he installed a brand new high efficiency tankless boiler, and it was 4-inch flue gas ventilation, so massive, 4-inch diameter, and it was a straight piece, wasn't even a union or a connection or anything like that, but a straight piece. Somewhere along it, that cross section had become weak, and it was literally just dripping condensate liquid out of it, because it had basically had a hole formed, just a little pinhole somewhere in the plastic. It just hadn't happened to be noticed, when it was installed. But after it had been running for a little while, the flue gas was, the condensate was coming back. It wasn't pitched, was one thing, and then it just collected, and there's a little tiny microscopic pinhole, and it started just dripping through there.
Right.
So yeah, that was annoying. I had to saw the thing in half, take out the section that was dripping, and then glue in a union. And it wasn't just one, 4-inch PVC pipe all by itself out in the open. It was, two of them tucked up right in between two beams in a basement. So I had, yeah, it was joy of joys. It was like right.
Never gonna be easy.
Yeah. Oh no, never, never. It was right after Christmas too, so I was like really in the mood to be back at work. I was like, oh, crap. So yeah, it's just what happens. So your book's also got a section where it talks about category of ventilations. There's 4 categories you're going to see, and it's page 882. It's got a bullet point list where it just goes category 1, 2, 3, 4. Basically, what it has to do with is condensate and flue gas temperatures. That's what it's looking at. That's how they rate. What style of venting do you need? Is a category 1, 2, 3, or 4? So it's nothing too crazy. Most of the time, you're going to see it where when you're dealing with ventilation, it'll the manufacturer will tell you what they want for a new install, especially for these new 90% furnaces with high efficiency ones with the plastic, because everyone's switching to it. They have it where they do a step-by-step guide telling you how can you install how can you install the flue piping for it, and what's the best way and what's the best method and all these different things. So pretty interesting. All right, so gas piping, this is the other style of piping we're going to see for a gas furnace. You're going to deal with the flue piping to make sure that we get the flue gases out. The gas piping is to make sure that we get the gas in. Whether it's propane or natural gas, it's going to need piping to get there. How it uses it, the main thing you're going to see is going to be something called wrought iron steel. I'll write it out. That is the main material that's used for most piping. We have it where it's nice though because manufacturers will have it where they'll give you a pre-cut piece, and they'll give you, they sell it in increments, so you can buy a foot, 6-inch piece. I think when it gets below a foot, I think it starts going in inch increments. So you can go 1 foot, 11 inches, 10 inches, 9 inches. You can just buy pre-cut, pre-threaded piping, so you don't have to worry about threading it. You don't have to worry about anything like that. You just got to make sure you measure it out, count how many unions and connections you need for everything. And there's all sorts of different things with this. But the main thing to understand with it is you want to make sure when you're using and you're connecting these pipes, you want to use pipe wrenches. Makes sense. That's what we use. That's what they're used for. Those big, I always call them the cartoon wrenches because they really look like the ones from the cartoon. But those style, that pipe wrench is used for gas lines. And you always want to use 2 of them because you want to have it where you use one to grab onto the pipe, and then the other one is to move the union or the fitting or the connection, whatever it is. Because you want to have one thing always stable and only one thing moving. If you have one thing moving, it could move other things connected down the line to it. Yeah, it's not difficult to do gas pipe fittings. It's pretty simple, makes a lot of sense. The big thing is having bonuses and extra stuff to a system that a customer may not have, especially for residential systems. One of the biggest things that residential systems will skip out on is they will avoid having any sort of gas shutoff valve. So you can have it where typically for a furnace, right before you get to it, you'll have you'll have it where you're going to get some sort of T basically. And that T connection, even with the straight line thing. So that T connection has got it where it's going to be, you'll have your main gas coming in here. We'll say this connection, oh my God, I'm really bad at this. So we've got our gas, our main gas coming in. You got it where there's your appliance, whether it's your furnace or whether it's a stove or anything like that, you're going to see it this way. And then at the bottom, you're going to have a drip cap or a trap. And that's going to be, it looks something. It's basically got a cap at the bottom. It's a little screw-on cap that just fits at the bottom. It's a small little short piece of gas piping. But this is going to make it so that we have, as our main gas lines coming in, if there's anything in that gas that's heavy, that's a non-combustible, that's gotten into the mixture for some reason, just because natural gas, especially propane, will be very dirty as far as when it comes into a system. So having it where you've got your main gas line coming in, it feeds into the appliance, our gas furnace, and then it's going to have this cap at the bottom to make sure anything that that shouldn't be in there will get collected. You only got to empty those out every couple of years, I would say, and it depends on what's the use of it. If it's a drip cap for a residential furnace, yeah, you can get away for a couple of years without having to do anything. If it's for a commercial oven or furnace or something like that, I'm probably going to be doing that annually to make sure it's working fine. Industrially, it might be on a even more regular basis. Might be a weekly thing that's on a maintenance log. So for these systems, we've got it where we're really trying to make sure that we keep the gas line feeding into the system as quickly as possible, as simply as possible. Don't take a bunch of turns and 90s and move all over the place if you don't have to. It's similar to what I said before with the flue piping and flue venting. If we can go straight out through the roof, let's go straight out through the roof. If I can draw a straight line from the main gas valve to the furnace, I'm going to draw a straight line from the main gas valve to the furnace. The only thing nowadays that you've got to watch out for as far as newer systems is insisting and installing a gas shutoff valve in the gas line right there at the furnace. Most people have it where the only shutoff they've got is the main shutoff for their entire house. So if you got to do work on the furnace, that means you've got to shut off gas to the whole house. No hot water, no stoves or ovens. There's that guy that you go over there, you got to make sure, hey, I got to fix something in your system, and I've got to shut off the main gas, and he gets pissed off because he's like, man, I really wanted some mac and cheese, and you're like, can't you make it in the microwave? It's 2020. But you just got to figure it out. But I mean, that's what it gets down to sometimes. So having that gas shutoff valve, it's like a $45, maybe $100 part. But if a customer is willing to invest in that, it's going to make it so that any technician that has to come out there anytime after that will be able to access the furnace, access the gas system, work on it without having to disturb anything else in the rest of the house. And usually if you pitch it to them like that, they're going to be way more on board for it. They're like, oh yeah, why do I not have that? Because the person who contracted out and built the whole neighborhood, outbid the next guy by saying, I'm going to spend, $2,000 less on materials in every house. And part of that $2,000 was he didn't put any gas shutoff valves at your appliances. And then they're going to start asking, what about my other appliances? Can I get one put on my water heater and my stove? And it's like, well, it's pretty much the same gas line. Might as well do that. Makes more money. So there's always more work to be done anywhere you go. So what's that? All right. So like it said right there at the beginning, though, observe all national and local codes. The more you know, work in an area, the more that you work with different people, you're going to learn more about different codes. You know, you'll talk to people about them. You'll discuss them with your coworkers, and if new things come up, typically you're always going to have a meeting. There's always a meeting about some sort of new code. Oh, hey, next month we've got it starting, or next year we've got it starting. You know, we've got to do this, this, and this from now on, or you know, you can no longer have gas lines running into a system without at least, you know, 3 inches of gas line, you know, outside of the main casing or something like that. So it's all sorts of crazy stuff that'll happen, but it just makes sense, you know, what you're going to be doing. Piping size, again, varies with the furnace rating and the gas type. So the larger the furnace rating, the larger the BTUs and everything like that, we're going to have it where that's going to increase the size of your gas piping as far as the diameter. The largest ones that I've seen as far as on standard residential systems are typically for tankless boilers and water heaters. They consume huge amounts of gas in very small amounts of time. And that's what makes them so energy efficient is they consume tons of gas really quick, burn it up, heat up the water, done. Okay, shut the gas off, it's done. We got the job done in 2 seconds as opposed to an hour, you know? So it's pretty cool how those things work, but you have to increase the size of the gas line. Some of them, it's got to be up to, you know, you're going from a 1/2 inch to a full inch. You're doubling the size of the gas line. Others, it's only, you know, 1/2 inch to 3/4. So it's, you know, you're going 50% increase, but it's still, that's 50% more, you know, volume of gas you're going to be able to get into the system. So it's pretty cool how that works. But as far as making connections and everything like that, the big thing I always recommend is pipe dope. I'm not a huge fan of the Teflon tape. I've done it before, typically for gas fittings for propane. I like Teflon tape more. I like pipe dope on natural gas. I don't know why, my brain's just that way. But honestly, if I had to make a justification for it, it's just that propane's a little bit dirtier, and it'll probably eat through pipe dope a little bit faster than it will Teflon tape. I don't have anything to prove that it says or will or won't, but yeah, that's just my mentality behind it. Either way, you can use either one. There's different brands, different styles, different colors of everything. The main thing with the gas piping to understand is you have to use, if you're going to use Teflon tape, it has to be the yellow one. There's white Teflon tape, which you've probably seen at the store, or you've seen at a shop or anything like that, you know, Lowe's or Home Depot. Comes in a little disc. It's blue and then a little white ring on the outside of it. It pops open and it's this thin little Teflon tape. It's really, really annoying to work with sometimes. But the yellow kind is the only kind that's approved for gas furnaces. I'll make sure to get, I think I need to get my set of Teflon tapes to bring in and at least show you guys on the video what those are going to look like. So you've just got to look for that. Like I said before, drip tap or that trap. That's what you got to make sure is always there and present. I got those. How'd that happen? All right. So assembly must be leak test and purge. We'll talk about the leak test in a second. So right here, leak testing. It's a very, very easy system to leak test. Very easy to leak test the system. It doesn't take a lot. There's a couple of different ways we can do it. One is every joint and connection and fitting and spot that I've, you know, put 2 pieces of pipe together, every single connection, I can spray down and visually inspect with a soapy solution to basically soap and water, just to spray and see. And if I see bubbles forming at any of those connections, then I've got a leak at that connection. Now that takes some time though, especially when you're talking about gas piping that you're running for very long distances, or you know, having it where you're making a lot of connections. Easier option is to do a what's called a drop test, where you use a manometer. So you hook your manometer up to your gas valve inlet pressure coming in. You check and see what the pressure's at. Then you shut off the gas to the furnace and you just watch the manometer. And after 3 minutes, that manometer does not drop in pressure. If nothing changes, if it doesn't drop, it can increase. As long as it doesn't drop, you have it where the system does not have a leak. Because from the point where you shut it off to the inlet of the gas valve, you've contained that gas, and yet the pressure hasn't changed at all during that time. You know, and so it takes about 3 to 5 minutes typically to prove for a drop test and see whether or not you've actually got a leak or not in the system. That's usually a pretty easy one to do. It's what I've done most of the time when I've done leak tests for a gas furnace. Has been a drop test, just because it's simple. You don't have to do a whole lot, and it really it at least lets you know the whole system overall really quickly. Now, when I'm trying to find a single leak, no, I'm not doing a drop test. The drop test is just to see if there's a leak at all. When I'm trying to find a single leak is when I'm going to probably do that soap and water solution and start spraying everything down, all the joints and everything. So purging the system, you've got it where even if you have it where you shut off the gas to the in the line going to the system, and you force the system on to burn whatever left it can in that line, there's still residual natural gas or propane in that line. And the main thing you got to make sure is that you've got you're safely ventilating that system out. There's going to be some natural gas. When you break those connections, when you take those fittings apart, it's going to release. And you don't want to have it where it replaces the oxygen in your air and then makes you choke out or makes it hard for you to breathe or just stinks up the whole room like rotten eggs. So having it where you've got proper ventilation whenever you're working with these with piping is very, very important. Otherwise, you're asking for some trouble. All right, cool. So that's all we got for tonight as far as the lecture and everything like that is concerned. Again, I'm going to upload this video to YouTube and send it out later. I'm also going to send out some videos in a minute, hopefully instead of a 9 o'clock meeting, we're going to have more videos with questions. And then at 8 o'clock in 20 minutes or so, I'm going to have it where I'll go over the questions that were sent the other night so that we can discuss that, talk about some good ideas, some thoughts and things that people had, and answer some things that people were confused about or were interested by. So that's it. Again, 8 o'clock. I will see y'all again, and we'll be back in here.